Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. Today, we're diving straight into the fascinating and, honestly, slightly misunderstood truth behind electric vehicle horsepower and thermal management. I am so thrilled you're here because we're unpacking a topic that literally transforms how we understand electric cars. Our whole focus today is just to break down, in a really simple and engaging way, what's actually going on inside the battery and motor when you take an EV on a long journey. We're going to look at the undeniable laws of physics, real-world highway data, and the incredible engineering making modern driving possible. So let's jump right in. Let's kick things off with a bit of a provocative question to set up a real myth versus reality check. Have you ever wondered why a modern EV, the kind that aggressively throws you back into your seat at a city traffic light, can suddenly feel, kind of restrained when you're cruising for hours on the highway? Why does a punchy 113 horsepower EV sometimes feel exactly like a 45 horsepower Fiat Panda when you're out on the open road? It's wild, right?
To get to the bottom of this, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with a quick e-bike primer, then scale up to peak versus nominal power, hit the highway reality check, and finally, look at the engineering fix.
All right, part 1, the e-bike primer, and understanding the micromechanics.
Now, before we even talk about two-ton cars, it's super helpful to look at e-bikes. The e-bike industry strictly separates safe, continuous output from short, intense bursts of speed. Basically, manufacturers give you two numbers. You've got nominal power, which is the output the motor can produce continuously without, melting itself. And on the flip side, there's peak power. This is the absolute maximum the motor can generate. But, and this is a huge but, only for a fraction of a second to maybe 1 or 2 seconds before issues start popping up.
Looking at those two very different numbers, you might be thinking, well, why can't I just keep my motor at peak wattage indefinitely? Like, if it can hit that speed, why not just lock it in and fly down the road?
Well, here's the catch. The coils get way too hot. If an e-bike motor runs at peak wattage for too long, it gets dangerously hot. To save itself from frying, the system's controllers basically force it to dial back the output dramatically. It'll actually drop to delivering even less than the nominal power for a few minutes, just to let those coils cool down to a safe level. So you get this amazing burst of speed, but it's followed by a pretty heavy performance penalty.
Which brings us to part 2, peak versus nominal power, scaling this whole concept up to 2-ton electric cars. Let's move to the macro scale. The physics literally don't change, the stakes just get much higher. In the automotive world, those massive horsepower numbers printed in bold on dealership brochures, those are almost always peak power. It represents that thrilling initial acceleration, that sprint off the line, or a really quick overtaking maneuver. It's the absolute maximum effort the motor can output, but only for a limited time. Think of it like a sprinter. Explosive energy, but absolutely incapable of maintaining that exact pace for an entire marathon. But the reality of long-distance driving? That relies entirely on nominal power. Officially known under the ECE R85 standard as the 30-minute power rating, this is our marathon runner. This number represents the hard thermal limit, the actual power the car can deliver constantly over a 30-minute period without the motor, the inverter, or the battery overheating.
Just look at this dramatic drop-off using a super popular EV, the Volkswagen ID.3. It's marketed with a really impressive 204 horsepower. That's the peak. But its nominal power, the amount it can actually sustain for 30 minutes, just 95 horsepower. Crazy, right? The car you bought for its 200-plus horsepower performance is actually operating with less than half of that under continuous strain.
So, part 3, the highway reality check. Let's look at marketing numbers versus the open road.
Here's the absolute core of the issue. What actually happens when you take these vehicles onto the highway for a long trip? Honestly, it all comes down to how you drive. In the city, your EV is an absolute champion. You use peak power to easily beat gas cars off the line, and then you coast or stop, which gives the system plenty of time to cool down. But on the highway, cruising at a constant speed, there are no brakes. That constant speed forces the electronics to cap the output at that lower nominal limit just to prevent massive thermal damage.
This data is the ultimate reality check. It shows exactly how popular EVs compare to older internal combustion or ICE cars when they're locked into their nominal highway limits. Check out the Citroën EC3, peak of 113 horsepower, but a nominal of just 45. In terms of continuous power, you are essentially driving the equivalent of an old 54 horsepower Fiat Panda. Or look at the Tesla Model 3. A 283 horsepower car drops to a 120 horsepower nominal rating. That gives it the continuous cruising power of a diesel Ford Focus. It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? Our source actually sums this up beautifully, noting that on the highway, the electric car essentially transforms into a vehicle equipped with a much smaller combustion engine in terms of available continuous power reserves. Obviously, you can still maintain the speed limit, but your reserve power for, say, a sudden, aggressive overtaking maneuver, that's suddenly very limited because the car is actively protecting its components from literally melting.
All right, finally, part 4, the engineering fix and how top cars beat the heat.
Now, I know this might sound slightly grim for highway drivers, but don't worry. Automotive engineers have developed some brilliant technological solutions to combat this exact thermal problem. The industry is basically fighting heat with advanced tech. The 3 big keys to stability are active liquid cooling that keeps the battery and motor in their Goldilocks temperature zone, modern native EV platforms, especially those running 800-volt architectures, and efficient heat pumps, which drastically optimize energy consumption and relieve thermal stress on long trips.
Even in smaller vehicle segments where space and budget are super tight, certain cars are totally standing out. The Fiat 500e has a wonderfully balanced liquid cooling system to prevent drastic performance cuts on the highway. The Honda e-N1 uses a specialized platform prioritizing thermal stability over pure, instant thrust. And stepping into the compact utility space, the MG4 is a benchmark with its oversized thermal management, while the Volvo EX30 uses a highly advanced architecture to stay cool. But if you're doing serious, prolonged highway miles, you really want to look at the C-segment cruisers. The 800-volt architecture of the Hyundai Ioniq 5 and Kia EV6 is a game-changer. It generates significantly less heat during constant high-speed driving, which is the closest you can get to high-end combustion performance. And of course, the Tesla Model 3 rear-wheel drive remains the gold standard here. The capacity of its inverter and the sheer brilliance of its software logic manage heat so effectively that performance stays impressively constant even under heavy stress. Before we wrap up today, I really want to sincerely thank all of you for joining me on this deep dive. Your genuine curiosity and passion for understanding how this tech actually works in the real world is exactly what drives us to unpack these explainer topics. I'm going to leave you with one final thought to ponder. As we look at all the incredible innovations happening right now, we have to ask, will future battery and motor technology completely erase this gap between peak and nominal power? Or is the thermal limit simply a permanent law of electric physics that we're always going to have to design around? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep exploring.